On today's show, we're going to go over the most important news stories of the last 10 days or so, discuss how our rankings may have shifted, and also hit on some other rankings changes Evan has made. Let's get into it here, Evan, with news, rankings, and fallout. And we have to start with the situation that's captivated the NFL. I'm honestly tired of this Brandon Ayuk situation. I'm sure a lot of people out there are tired of the Brandon Ayuk situation as well. I'll try to recap what's happening. Basically, Brandon Ayuk showed up for camp, but has been in street clothes the entire time. Can't tell if the 49ers are trying to negotiate with him and get a new deal done, or if they're trying to trade him. They do have him on the fifth year option now. They have fines, they have franchise tags, they have all the leverage. Much to my surprise, and I was wrong on this, much to my surprise, it seems like they've actually gone and explored trading him to the point where leaks around the framework of a trade with the Patriots, leaks around the framework of a trade with the Browns. And then the Steelers stuff comes into the mix, and all of a sudden, everybody seems to think that he's going to the Steelers. I don't know. Nothing's happened yet. And maybe this is all just leverage that Ayuk or the 49ers are using to get a deal done for him to go back to San Francisco. So I'm lost on the Ayuk stuff right now. Evan, what's your read on what's going on there these days?
Well, all along, the most logical and reasonable outcome would have been that the 49ers keep him, make a Super Bowl run. Either they pay him or they let him play out his fifth year and then maybe even franchise tag him next year. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world for them to keep Brandon Ayuk. He's one of the best players in their offense, and he's really their only true X receiver. Ricky Pearsall is more along the lines of like a Debo, and Debo obviously is a unique entity in and of himself. But Brandon Ayuk is their true X receiver, and they don't have another guy like that. However, when you inject emotion and hurt feelings and whatever is going on with Brandon Ayuk into the situation, then you can't always expect the most logical and reasonable outcome to happen. And at this point, it seems likelier than not that he's going to get traded. I mean, to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh seems like the favorites right now.
That's what everybody seems to be saying. What if the 49ers are using Pittsburgh to negotiate the framework of a deal? Because the reports today that I read on Thursday were that Pittsburgh is not offering enough to Ayuk in compensation, and they're not offering enough to the 49ers in terms of trade compensation. What if the 49ers go back to Ayuk and be like, listen, man, we went out there, we got you a deal with the Patriots, you rejected it. We got you a deal with the Steelers, you rejected their offer or whatever. Now you come back and you sign with us for this amount. I wouldn't put that past the 49ers either. So we have made small ceiling bumps on George Kittle and Debo Samuel. We've also made a small bump on Ricky Pearsall and a small dock on George Pickens. But yeah, I mean, I think if he does go, I guess the good question, Evan, is if he does go, how high would you take Debo Samuel? Because right now, some of those guys going in the early second round, I would probably take Debo over if Ayuk wasn't there.
Yeah, early to mid second round is where I think the Debo Samuel would belong. Ricky Pearsall becomes like a fringe top 100 player. Kittle, I mean, the upside goes. He gets more upside. I mean, all the other guys benefit for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it was rumored in the Cleveland trade that Amari Cooper would be coming back. But in this Pittsburgh trade, I don't think George Pickens is coming back. I don't know what they would be asking for. That's why it's kind of confusing for sure.
Juwan Jennings is another guy that could benefit.
Who would you take?
I mean, especially with this Christian McCaffrey injury. Like, the 49ers need to get this figured out with Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah.
And I do still think that it's Matt Mayako, who has covered the 49ers longer than anybody. He, in his reports, he always states that it's still a possibility that Brandon Ayuk could come back to San Francisco. And so I think that that's definitely still a possibility, and it continues to make the most sense.
If Ayuk were to go, who would you rather have, Marvin Harrison Jr. or Debo Samuel?
Debo.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, clearly it would be, for you, Debo over Drake London as well. So, we will stay on top of that. And yeah, it's messy for sure. In some of the best ball stuff I've been doing, I've been lately been a little bit more aggressive on Debo and Kittle than I would normally. But like I said, I still think there's a 50-50 chance he comes back to San Francisco. We're recording this Thursday, August 8th, around 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Number 2 story, DeAndre Hopkins strained his knee, is out 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, this is not good. DeAndre Hopkins is 32 years old. The only good news about it is he doesn't need surgery. We have dropped down to 105 overall in the top 300 half PPR on DeAndre Hopkins, which sucks because I actually thought that the market had it wrong. The market was taking Calvin Ridley ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, and I thought that was wrong. And now we've had to go way different. We've had to go back to kind of where the market had it when it opened. We're down to 105 on Hopkins, 76 on Calvin Ridley. Evan, how severe or how worried are you about this DeAndre Hopkins knee injury?
So we have not heard the specifics of this injury, only that it's to his knee in 4 to 6 weeks. That sounds like an MCL sprain. As you mentioned, he's 32 years old. I know that you've had optimism on the Titans offense. I think DeAndre Hopkins is a big part of that. They also just had their starting right guard, Sadiq Charles, retire in the middle of training camp. So, it hasn't been a great camp so far for the Titans. Also, Will Levis and Calvin Ridley have allegedly been struggling to get on the same page.
Yeah.
They had a nice day yesterday, I guess, but for the first like 7 or 8 practices, I mean, they were struggling in that area. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is still playing at a very high level. Matt Harmon mentioned that on the wide receiver podcast, but I had to bump him way down. I mean, he's beyond number 100 for me.
Yeah. Evan
And that
went
gave Calvin Ridley a slight boost up.
Evan went to 101 on DeAndre Hopkins and 67 on Calvin Ridley. There's a chance DeAndre Hopkins is back for week 1, and I don't hate like scooping up him a little bit when he falls to that like 110 range, but I'm really not trying to push it on a 32-year-old with a seemingly somewhat severe knee injury coming into the season.
Have you been taking any shots on Treylon Burks?
Yes, extreme deep leaguers. 20th round Treylon Burks is something that I've done, and also we gave Tyler Boyd a little bit of a boost as well. I just think if Treylon Burks is going to win, it's going to be out of the slot, and that's obviously where Tyler Boyd's going to play. So, I think Treylon Burks is an interesting like first round talent. DeAndre Hopkins is hurt and 32 years old. Deep leagues, I think you can do that. What do you think? Do you think Treylon has any chance?
I don't know. I mean, he was a mid to late first round pick coming out. Didn't win as a route runner early in his career. Had like conditioning and conditioning stuff.
Yeah.
Like was out of shape. Brian Callahan was talking about how Treylon Burks has like remade his body and is looking better. I don't know. That's maybe just a way of trying to encourage a young player who has struggled. I don't know. I think he's worth very late round dart throws.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, barring an aggravation from DeAndre Hopkins, I don't think that Burks is going to play really enough if Hopkins is healthy. But it's a bet again that Hopkins can't stay healthy and Will Levis actually takes a step forward. All right. Sad one here. Josh Downs sustained a high ankle sprain in practice this week. He'll be out 4 to 6 weeks. He was one of our targets as like a sleeper-ish guy. One of the last wide receivers that had some upside, was reportedly having a big camp. We've talked a ton about these high ankle sprains, Evan. I mean, my God, the Austin Eckler one last year completely tanked his season. Jerry Jeudy, I think it was like 2021 or 2022, maybe. His whole season got wrecked by an early high ankle sprain. Trevor Lawrence sustained one later last year. I mean, it's just bad. And I'm sure there's tons of more examples that I'm missing. This is really bad for a player. How worried are you about Josh Downs? Reported timeline from Rap Sheet is 4 to 6 weeks.
We talk ad nauseum about this every single year. I think that pound for pound, a high ankle sprain is maybe the worst injury that a player can suffer from a fantasy standpoint. I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, I don't want anybody to ever get hurt. I don't want, anybody to suffer season-ending injury. But from a fantasy standpoint, I would rather have my dude hit IR or be out for the season than, I'm holding on to him, hoping he comes back. When he comes back, he's only at like 60%. Is he ever going to get back to 100%? And usually the answer is no. So I don't know. This was a sad one. I had Josh Downs at like 143 overall. I thought he was a pretty intriguing pick. He won as a route runner big time as a rookie. He was hurt in the second half of the season and wasn't as productive, but he got off to a really, really nice start as a rookie. He had a locked in role in the slot. I had optimism about him, and he's completely out of the 150 now.
Yeah, he's also out of the top 150 an hour, top ETR, top 300, where he's down to 161 for us in the top 300. Evan is completely dropped. Josh Downs out. Does this make you think that AD Mitchell, because AD Mitchell is a guy who was a fade for me based on worries about Anthony Richardson getting to his second and third read,
Hmm.
and also some rotation with Alec Pierce, and the fact that the NFL clearly did not think that highly of AD Mitchell. I know there was some off-field stuff. They allowed him to slip to like the 16th overall wide receiver or something like that off the board. But any interest for you in AD Mitchell, or does this make you more interested in Michael Pittman, perhaps?
Yeah, see, I saw you guys in your statistical projections adding to AD Mitchell and maybe to Alec Pierce. My first inclination was to add to Michael Pittman
Mm-hmm.
because Pittman sort of wins in a similar area of the field to Josh Downs, whereas I think AD Mitchell and Alec Pierce are just clear perimeter players who might end up in that sacrificial X role, especially if, as you mentioned, Anthony Richardson doesn't get to his second and third reads because those guys are going to be second and third read players.
Yep.
So my initial inclination was to add a little bit to Michael Pittman and not AD Mitchell and not Alec Pierce.
Yeah, I'm just checking Josh Down's slot rate from last year. Yeah, he was in the slot 610 snaps, out wide 172. So Josh Downs was certainly an inside player last year, not where Alec Pierce and AD Mitchell play. And yeah, the Pittman thing is interesting. I take him in like when he gets to the 3-4 turn, a decent amount. I think he'll go later than that in home leagues though, uh, for sure. And I'm okay with Michael Pittman. Not like a fist pump in, but okay. All right. Another injury here. Puka Nakua, knee injury. Rams say he burst a bursa sac. Rams also said, and Sean McVay has been very good and very transparent on injuries. Sean McVay also said that Puka is in no danger of missing week one, but he is week to week. And McVay even went on to say that Puka's prep for week one against the Lions is not in doubt. So we had moved a little bit from Puka to Cooper Kupp. We're debating sticking with that based on some of the camp report stuff on Kupp. But yeah, Evan, I'm curious how you see this Puka situation and the Puka Kupp stuff playing out.
So what I did was I had Puka Nakua as a first tier receiver when he was 100%. I moved him out of the first tier, only dropped him a couple spots in the 150, but I moved him to the top of the second tier. And then I bumped Cooper Kupp, about whom reports have been very positive about his health. I bumped him from the top of the third tier into the bottom of the second tier. And I think that he is now a very comfortable, confident target in drafts. Um, it's always a bigger risk when a player comes into the season having suffered an injury. I mean, you risk aggravation. We don't know for sure if he's going to be ready for week one. He is a player that absorbs a lot of contact because of the way that they employ him. Does a lot of blocking, and does a ton of stuff in the middle of the field. He's going to be taking hits all season. So I docked him a little bit. I'm not afraid to draft him, but I do think that Cooper Kupp has become a more confident draft pick.
Yeah, I would still take Puka around that, pick 11, 12, 13, 14 spot. The Cooper Kupp one is interesting. Home League ADP has been real low on Cooper Kupp. It's at 39. We are at 27 overall on Cooper Kupp right now. And to be clear on Kupp, healthy all off season. I know we talked a lot to Harmon about Cooper Kupp, but healthy all off season, no reports of any injuries, etc. This would be the first time in a while he comes into a season clean and yeah. So Cooper Kupp late round 2, I think is totally fine play. Also, story 5 here is Christian McCaffrey strained his calf. I know Evan alluded to this earlier. Strained his calf, fully expected to be ready for week one. He wasn't going to play in the preseason anyways. I don't think this is a big deal, but I've seen some people say, oh, calf injuries are so bad for running backs, et cetera, et cetera. We did not make any moves on this. We have not docked Christian McCaffrey at all. Evan, have you changed your thought on Christian McCaffrey based on this calf injury?
Yeah, I did, at least temporarily. I moved him. I did not move his tier or anything. I still have him as the RB1 overall, but I moved him to like number 5 overall. So I have 4 receivers coming off the board before him.
Mm-hmm.
Just to me, it's not worth the risk at the top of the draft when you can draft, an absolute stud who is healthy versus, obviously Christian McCaffrey's a stud, but he's not healthy right now. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. Also, the 49ers immediately signed Matt Breida and Keyshawn Vaughn. I mean, they've already signed two additional running backs. In terms of who is right behind him, Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason, according to reports, are like neck and neck for the number 2 role. Jordan Mason has mostly been a special teamer so far, and we've seen that Elijah Mitchell is pretty talented, runs the ball really, really hard. So I think that Elijah, in the event that Christian McCaffrey were to miss time, and they're saying that he's not going to, I think that Elijah Mitchell would probably be the lead back, and they'd sprinkle in some Jordan Mason.
So just on those signings, Eli Mitchell and Isaac Guerrero are both hurt right now. Obviously, McCaffrey is too. So they just needed.
That's true. Good point.
They just needed some bodies. I still think that McCaffrey is number 1 pick, in part because I don't think this is a very serious injury. He has had a history of playing an insane amount of snaps and not getting hurt over the last few years. And the biggest thing for me is structurally, in these home league drafts, I am so confident I'm going to get insane wide receiver values in the middle and the later rounds that I kind of want to take running back early. So I am totally fine with Christian McCaffrey at 1.01. But to Evan's point, if you're worried at all about this, there are a lot of other good options. And I definitely think, CD and Tyreek are options if you're worried about Christian McCaffrey and you have the 1.1. Number 6 story is Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks, Panthers rookie running back, not expected until week 3 or week 4 at the earliest. Basically, Dave Canales said that there's a good chance he starts the season on PUP. And if he can get back by week 3 or week 4, that's great. But they're taking the long view with this guy. They think he's a really talented player. And yeah, to me, like that's the whole point on Jonathan Brooks. They're rebuilding this year. What is the motivation to get Jonathan Brooks back from an ACL? He comes back and the team is 3-6 or 4-10, and you want to load him up with 20 touches. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me whatsoever. And they have Chuba Hubbard who can play. Chuba Hubbard was PFF's number 16 running back at his 63 qualifiers last year. So I'm the only one that thinks this. Everybody else at ETR thinks that Jonathan Brooks is a pretty solid pick. I would agree that if you have IR spot in your league, he's a better pick. But Jonathan Brooks is someone that I've been, I guess, against ETR consensus on being out on. Evan, where do you come down on the Jonathan Brooks stuff now that we know week 3 or week 4 sounds like a best case scenario?
So he suffered his ACL tear last November. After they drafted him, the Panthers were saying that he was going to be ready for training camp. So he is behind their scheduled timeline, which I think is concerning. Have concerns about. He's on the NFI list, which obviously functions the same way as PUP. He could open the season on the NFI list.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I moved him down. I don't have a ton of confidence in the offense as a whole. I don't have a ton of confidence in his role. Now we can't have confidence in his health. It's a concerning situation. I mean, you can't expect any immediate impact as the season begins, and then you're just kind of holding on for dear life, as the season progresses, and he might end up being a drop at some point.
I mean, it's tough because this is the kind of player I want to be in on, like a talented rookie running back who is going to give me back-weighted production. Like that's the kind of profile that I want. But man, if you think the Panthers are going to be better than the market does, the market has the Panthers as the second worst offense in the entire league in terms of implied points per game. If you think that's wrong, then I can see making a better case for Brooks. But yeah, I mean, given the state of the offense, they also have Brandon Thorne's number 23 offensive line do the Panthers as well. So yeah, just a lot of flags for me on Jonathan Brooks. Let's go to number 7 story. Another injury here. Justin Herbert hurt his foot. They're calling it a plantar fascia injury for Justin Herbert. Is expected to be ready for week 1, but there's a lot of people out there saying this plantar fascia stuff is not great. It can linger through the whole season, could affect his mobility. I will note that Justin Herbert did give you a little bit of rushing. He had 228 rush yards and 3 rushing touchdowns in 13 games last year. That's not nothing, so I do think that matters. And obviously, to play the quarterback position well in the NFL, you need some mobility. Also, Evan, what do you think of this Justin Herbert foot injury news?
He was already, because of the volume concerns, because of the weaponry concerns with the Chargers, he was already like a fringe quarterback 1. And now I moved him down to like a pretty clear quarterback 2. It's not on paper a situation that is conducive for a lot of fantasy scoring.
Yeah.
in and of itself. And now maybe you take away some of his mobility. Maybe he has a setback at some point. I mean, he's a clear quarterback 2 at this point for me.
Yeah, we have him as the quarterback 18 in the ETR ranks right now, just behind Jared Goff, right around Deshaun Watson. Evan has dropped Justin Herbert completely out of his top
Yeah, I have him
150.
quarterback 16 right now, and he's sort of in that like Matthew Stafford, Tua, Kirk Cousins, that tier.
Yeah, for sure. Does it affect at all what you think about Lad McConkey or Josh Palmer this season?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I would agree, and I still like those guys. I think that Justin Herbert is such a talented player. They're not, especially with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, they're not going to be able to run the ball on every play like some people think. And I do still like Lad and Josh Palmer here. All right, story 8 is this Jordan Addison situation. So finally, it gets announced that Jordan Addison has been charged with DUI. He doesn't have a court date until October 7th. Now, we know how this stuff goes with the court dates. Lawyers can get this stuff pushed back. You can ask the judge for continuance. This stuff could go on forever. It would not shock me at all. And shout out to Drew Davenport, who does a lot of this stuff. I believe he's an actual lawyer in real life. He said that there's a good chance this could just get pushed out, not affect him at all this season. Our question, and Sam Sherman brought this up to us, is if I was Jordan Addison, I'd want to be suspended this year. I'm making less money this year. The Vikings are going to be probably pretty bad as they try to get JJ McCarthy up to speed, or at least mediocre. You might as well get the suspension out of the way this year. So maybe he comes in with some plea, but you can't plead to anything too severe because then the NFL can make your suspension more than 3 games. So it's a bit complicated. Evan, how are you thinking about Jordan Addison in drafts right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking bigger picture, you're thinking long term. I think that's a smart point by Sam that Jordan Addison should want to get this suspension out of the way as quickly as possible. Jordan Addison is also a dude who's out here getting DUIs and driving 140 miles per hour. So
Yeah.
I don't know that he's thinking big picture and long term in general on a day to day basis.
Yeah. Also,
so he's probably just like, no, man, just keep pushing it back, keep pushing it back. You know?
He also went on Instagram and like tweeted a picture or sent a picture of him like drinking like a day after the DUI, which I thought was weird. But anyways, in terms of the actual player and drafting though, this is the kind of profile that I really like. Year 1, 70 catches, 911 yards, 10 touchdowns, really good underlying metrics. Awesome profile heading into year 2 for Jordan Addison. And if he ends up not playing, if he ends up not getting suspended at all this year, I really like him at his ADP of 96. I mean, his home league ADP is 96 right now. We're going to talk more about Vikings quarterback situation here in a second. But Jordan Addison is like the kind, especially with Hawkinson, maybe not back for a while. Like Jordan Addison is the kind of player I want to be on. So I've been taking more risks on Jordan Addison lately for sure. Let's stick with the Vikings here. Evan's boy, Sam Darnold. Shout out to Kevin Seifert for charting the quarterback snaps. First team quarterback snaps so far in camp. All but 2 have gone to Sam Darnold, which, I guess makes sense. I guess I'm a little surprised they're not trying to get JJ McCarthy some more work. But Evan, I know you were on this when we did the Sleepers show. Any more thoughts on how long Sam Darnold can hold this job and what you think Sam Darnold means for JJ and Addison? Because right now it's clear Darnold's starting week 1 and probably going to have a reasonable leash.
I think he's going to be totally fine for Justin Jefferson. And I think that as you go further down the pass catching depth chart, the pass catching totem pole, it becomes more concerning. But I definitely think like he has the ability to consistently get the ball to Justin Jefferson. He did that with Robbie Anderson back with the Jets. The situation is just so much better for Sam Darnold than it ever has been before in his career. I actually think that he can hold this starting job for the majority, if not the entire season.
Yeah, the problem for me is that the Vikings opening schedule is tough. Their first game is fine at the Giants, but then they play 49ers, Texans, Packers, Jets, and Lions. I mean, they could easily be 1-5 at that point. And their calls for JJ McCarthy, if they're 1-5, are going to be deafening. I mean, absolutely deafening. So, yeah, I think it's going to be tough than Evan does for Darnold to hold a job through the whole year. But I do agree with Evan that just on arm talent and playing the quarterback position at a reasonable level, I'm still fine with Addison and Justin Jefferson. Story number 10, Big Mike Williams coming off the ACL tear. He was activated from PUP, and the quotes are he's further ahead than anticipated. Now, Jets anticipated him being ready. Remember, in free agency, Jets gave Mike Williams a 1-year, $15 million deal, which suggested they were expecting a clean recovery here. The quotes, Evan, are that they want him on the Breece Hall plan. The Breece Hall plan last year was did play in week 1, but his snaps and his touches were limited. Slowly ramped up from there. I would say Breece Hall was probably fully unleashed by the Jets in like early/mid October. That sounds like a pretty fair plan to me on Mike Williams. Evan, where you at on drafting Mike Williams of the Jets these days?
I'm open to it because his price is not particularly steep. He suffered his ACL injury in week 3 of last year. So, I mean, he's almost like he's not too far off being a full year removed from that injury. In theory, Mike Williams, the way he plays, the way he wins as a back shoulder kind of player, Aaron Rodgers can throw the back shoulder better than anybody. So I think it's really nice that he's off PUP. He's going to be able to get those practice reps in with Aaron Rodgers now. I'm open to drafting him as a wide receiver 5 for sure with some upside.
Yeah, he's so cheap. ADP in home leagues right now is 159 on Mike Williams. Evan has him up at 121. I like where Evan has him there. Certainly some upside on Mike Williams. And like he's competing with total dust. We're talking about
Right.
Alan Lazard and Brownlee and I don't even know, Xavier
Yeah,
Gibson.
it's Garrett Wilson and then Mike Williams and then like nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you have faith in Malachi Corley, I haven't really heard any positive buzz on him so far.
No.
But I mean, even their tight ends, Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert, like Mike Williams should be the clear number 2 pass catcher. Well, Breece Hall
Yeah.
is probably going to end up being the number 2 pass catcher, but the clear number 3, I think, behind Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall.
Yep. All right. Let's go to a guy that Evan mentioned on the Sleepers show. I'm curious if you're worried about this, Evan. Dontavian Wicks. Packers do this family night every year where it's like a, intra-squad scrimmage effectively. Jordan Love played 26 snaps in that scrimmage. The wide receiver snaps were Romeo Doubs, 21, Christian Watson, 19, Jaden Reed, 16, Dontavian Wicks, 6, Bo Melton, 5, Grant DeBose, 2. That's kind of what I expected. Doubs and Watson playing the most, and then Reed in all the 3 wide receiver sets, and then Wicks as the 4th one rotating in. And that's kind of my concern on Dontavian Wicks. So, Evan, are you worried about this at all coming out of Packers family night?
Yeah, I've had to drop him a bunch. I mean, I came out hot initially on Dontavian Wicks. I thought that there was a scenario where it could be Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed in 3 receiver sets, and then Christian Watson as like the situational deep threat. They limit his reps, in order to, as a means of managing his past hamstring injuries. But no, they're forcing it with Christian Watson. Right now, it looks like he's going to be in the starting lineup. Dontavian Wicks is going to rotate in as a guy who maybe, at least to open the season, is only playing 40% of the snaps per game.
Yeah.
So I've had to move him. I came out with him in the 80s initially, and he's down to like 120 or something like that.
Yeah, Evan's at 122. I will say the ADP on Wicks is very cheap, 161. And if you're in a deep league that has a deep bench, I'm okay stashing Wicks. I just want to see how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm not optimistic he's going to play enough for me to play him in a home league, but yeah, I think he's a great stash for sure. Other Packers news. Tucker Kraft already back at practice from that pectoral. Remember he was lifting and ripped the pectoral off the bone or something crazy like that. He is back at practice, says he'll be out there for week 1. Just adding more guys to the mess that is the Packers receiving. I mean, I count 7 guys who can earn targets for the Packers. Reed, Doubs, Watson, Wicks, Musgrave, Kraft, and Bo Melton. That's just so...
And Josh Jacobs can too.
And Josh Jacobs can earn targets too.
They are deep at the skill positions.
Does Tucker Kraft getting back in practice make you lower on Luke Musgrave, or how do you see the tight end rotation going there between Musgrave?
It doesn't make me any lower on Luke Musgrave. I think that Luke Musgrave has like classic year 2 tight end breakout potential. There's a bunch of guys. You remember how hyped up that tight end class was in the 2023 draft.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see a bunch of second-year breakouts from that group, and Luke Musgrave is definitely a candidate to be a part of that.
All right. Let's go to another tight end situation here. I thought it was notable that Colby Parkinson on the Rams depth chart was listed as a starter ahead of Davis Allen. And I don't really pay attention to these. We know the interns put them out. A lot of coaches don't even look at them. But normally, the incumbent, if they're just going through the motions, the incumbent is listed as the starter, and the new player is listed as the backup. But the Rams, who just got Colby Parkinson from the Seahawks, he's the starter, and their draft pick, Davis Allen, he's listed as the backup. And that jives with camp reports also, where Colby Parkinson has been running as the starting tight end. Tyler Higbee blew out his knee in the wild card loss to the Lions. He'll be 32 in January. So Colby Parkinson, I think, is an interesting tight end sleeper. I'm just not sure that he's good enough. This guy's like 260 pounds or something like that. Evan, any thoughts on Colby Parkinson as a sleeper tight end for the Rams?
Yeah, I think he's a sleeper to score like 7 or 8 touchdowns. He's 6'7", 252 pounds, 6'7".
Yeah.
I mean, I remember watching Seahawks games and like he stands out because he's so freaking tall. He is. They gave him a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. So I mean that's pretty substantial for a tight end who doesn't have a ton on his track record. But I mean, I think he's going to play a lot. He can block. Tyler Higbee, I don't even know if he's going to play at all this season. And Davis Allen is pretty limited athletically. So I think that it's going to be a lot of Colby Parkinson in the Rams offense this year. In those 3-by-1s, the 3 receivers, and then Colby Parkinson is the main tight end.
That was going to be my last point. If you win the starting tight end job for the Rams, you could easily be on the field for 90% of the snaps because they are in 11 personnel and do not rotate 90% of the time, so.
And by the way, Jordan Rodriguez, who covers the Rams, at one point wrote in an article that they were going to use more 2 tight end sets. She has walked that back significantly. I think people misinterpreted that, that they were all of a sudden going to become like a 12 personnel offense. No, it's just they have more flexibility. They can use Davis Allen and Colby Parkinson in certain situations. It's still going to be an 11 personnel offense.
Yeah, for sure.
Demarcus Robinson will be the number 3.
All right. Yes. Reportedly, Demarcus Robinson is like already won that job and is running away with it. He's locked in. Their Week 17 opponent, the Arizona Cardinals. I can't believe this Greg Dortch hype. Like I expected all the hype out of Cardinals camp to be reporters and coaches getting the full 3.9 for Marvin Harrison Jr. Instead, every day, every quote, every highlight reel is of Greg freaking Dortch. Dortch is ahead of Zay Jones on the inside, is ahead of Michael Wilson. I'm sorry, Michael Wilson is ahead of Zay Jones on the outside, and Dortch is ahead of Zay Jones on the inside. Expecting the 3 wide receiver set to be Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson, and Greg Dortch. Greg Dortch has always been good at earning targets when he gets a chance. It seems like he's going to have that chance this year. Drew Petzing is just fawning over this guy. Gannon's saying, in my opinion, he's elevated his game. He's yet to hit his ceiling. I think he's going to have a big year. The look in his eyes gives me confidence. What kind of crazy eyes killer stuff is this? But anyways, I can't believe it's Greg Dortch hype. Evan, are you buying it? What do you think about Greg Dortch this season?
I think that the Cardinals love Greg Dortch. And I think that the case has always been that Greg Dortch, he's 5'7" and 170 pounds, okay? But he's always been a really good football player. I mean, he was an awesome college football player. He, kind of turned Rondale Moore into dust in Arizona. He's got this slot receiver job locked in, I think. And I think he's earned it.
If anyone played college football, they remember Greg Dortch as, I believe it was like a sophomore at Wake Forest. Yeah, caught 89 balls. I mean, dude has been catching a lot of footballs for a very long time. I think he's an interesting late round pick, especially in Kyler stuff. Speaking of late round picks, 15th story we're going to talk about here today is Jalen McMillan reportedly winning the wide receiver 3 job just right away. And I don't want to say I'm surprised because Jalen McMillan had good draft capital, and not a lot of competition. Trey Palmer, I know, got some buzz, but he's probably not it. They're just like handing him the wide receiver 3 job. So I think the question now becomes, does the wide receiver 3 job in Tampa have any fantasy value to us? And how good do we think Jalen McMillan is? Evan, some people are calling him Jalen McMillions takes, but Jalen McMillan takes for you.
Is that right? Is that catching on? I think it's good for him. I think that he probably would need an injury to Chris Godwin to be a significant fantasy factor. I think as the number 3 receiver in a Baker Mayfield offense, I don't think he's going to make any fantasy noise early, but he's definitely a guy that we can keep on the radar. And if you drafted him, in one of your rookie dynasty leagues, like you're feeling pretty good
Yeah.
that he's been standing out early and already has locked in this number 3 receiver job.
For sure. I'm excited to see him play because I think it's a really interesting landing spot for him. Speaking of guys I'm interested in seeing him playing, Evan, our boy has gone mainstream. Andre Yoshivas has gone mainstream. Everybody's talking about him now. We got like Rap Sheet and all these big time people talking about Andre Yoshevich. Obviously, Evan and I have been talking about him for a long time as a dynasty stash for when T. Higgins leaves. But if you believe the reports out of camp, we don't have to wait for T. Higgins to leave. Andre Yosevich has been like the star of Bengals camp. They're talking about him being ahead of Jermaine Burton. They're trying him out in the slot, which he has never played before. I don't know. It seems like a lot of hype, but I'm excited for it because I like Andre Yoshevich, crazy athlete. Evan, have they gone too far on the Andre Yoshevich hype?
Andre Yoshivas, I'm just going to call him Yoshi because that's what they call him in the locker room. Yoshi would be like one of the biggest, most athletic slot receivers in the NFL. I mean, you look at his athletic profile. I mean, he's big time. He's big too. He's 6'3", 212. He's obviously smart. He went to Princeton. I don't know if he's going to be able to hold on to this though. Jermaine Burton is a really, really talented guy. Trent Irwin is a guy that they trust. Um, Charlie Jones is a guy that could play in the slot at times. It's going to be interesting to see if he can hold on to this job throughout preseason. But yeah, I mean, it's we said to stash him in Dynasty, and right now, if you stash him in Dynasty, I mean, he was certainly on waiver wires at one point. Maybe you stumbled into something.
I think that the most likely outcome is some type of rotation between Yoshivas and Burton. I don't. You can't keep playing Trent Irwin out there. I mean, you
Yeah.
just can't. So I think it's a rotation between those guys. But if somebody goes out and seizes it, that's a different story. So I'm definitely watching that one closely. Just have so much respect for Joe Burrow as a thrower.
I do not think that Jermaine Burton is going to be like a slot player for them.
Right.
So if he were to take over the 3 receiver job, I think we would see Jamar Chase in the slot quite a bit. But in this scenario now, with Yoshivas in the slot, Chase is going to be outside opposite T. Higgins, obviously.
Speaking of hype, number 17 story is about Will Shipley. Tons of buzz around Will Shipley out of Eagles camp. I thought they had enough trust in Kenny Gainwell. I like Kenny Gainwell enough that this would be more of a redshirtish year for Will Shipley. But it's not like Kenny Gainwell is some great player. And if Will Shipley is actually good, beating him out for the number 2 role behind Saquon Barkley is not that far-fetched. Evan, any thoughts on Will Shipley as a handcuff or other pick behind Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, Will Shipley was a really good college player. In 2022, he was a first-team All-ACC player as an all-purpose player. Really good return man, caught a bunch of passes. He didn't have as good of a final season at Clemson, and he had some injury stuff. Goes in the 4th round. I think he's more talented than Kenneth Gainwell. He's a really good athlete. He ran sub 4.4, 6.8 3-cone time. He's a little smaller, 206, but he can do a lot of different things. And I think has a chance. If they give him that chance, the Eagles seem to love Kenneth Gainwell for whatever reason. But I think that if he is able to get an opportunity to overtake Kenneth Gainwell, like he is a more talented option. And I think he's an interesting stash in like deeper rosters right now.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think I prefer my handcuffs to be cleaner, right? Like if Saquon Barkley went down, I want it to be clean. This guy is going to play all the snaps and he's going to smash. We have that, I think, with Blake Corum. I think we might have that with Dameon Pierce, although I wouldn't say that for sure. Maybe we have it with someone like a Zach Charbonnet if Kenneth Walker went down. It's not as clean with Will Shipley, like Gainwell and someone else would probably still play. But yeah, it's definitely a situation worth monitoring. 2 more stories here, small ones. Rondale Moore was carted off the field. This sounds like a really bad injury. Might cap a really disappointing career / start to Falcons career for Rondale Moore because, much to my surprise, he started out camp behind Ray McCloud and it didn't seem very close. I mean, when you get iced by Ray McCloud right out of the gate, that is scary. Now Rondale Moore, it seems like he's down with a severe injury. Evan, any interest for you in Ray McCloud or anything you can think that the Falcons are thinking here going with Ray over Rondale to start camp?
I think Ray McCloud is, an interesting guy right now. It seems like he's locked in that 3rd receiver job. They gave him a decent little contract, 2 years, $5 million. So I mean, they believe in him. He's been a special teamer primarily, but he's going to be the number 3 receiver if the season were to start today. Rondell Moore, they carted him off in an air cast, canceled practice. Like, we're not going to see him, again this season, I don't think. And you're right. I mean, he's been a star-crossed player from an injury standpoint, really going back to college. Was an exciting player at times, but just can never stay healthy.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, I mean, Greg Dortch outplayed him in Arizona. Period. In kind of a similar role. Okay, last one to hit on here. Tyrone Tracy makes his way into the top 150. Tyrone Tracy checks in at 149 overall in Evan's latest 150. From what I've heard, Tyrone Tracy, it will be like the Giants love him. He'll be the RB2. Like, I know people talk about Eric Gray, talk about other running backs. I think it's going to be Tyrone Tracy pretty cleanly here behind, some would say, a susceptible starter in Devin Singletary. So I get why this one is exciting. I get why he's in the top 150. Evan, anything more on Tyrone Tracy of the Giants?
Yeah, I think he's a legitimate sleeper. Coaches love, and Brian Dable especially, love Devin Singletary. But Devin Singletary is not anybody's idea of a special talent. I think he's going to struggle behind this Giants offensive line. So I think that at some point Tyrone Tracy could get legitimate looks. Tyrone Tracy was a polarizing player in like the film versus analytics communities, because the film guys loved him. And he went to the combine, and at 209 pounds, he ran 4.48, 40-inch vertical, 6'8" 3-cone, awesome athlete. But he's 25 years old because he played in college like for forever. He was a wide receiver. Yeah, he'll turn 25 in November. He was a wide receiver and then converted to running back. But you kind of like to see that, don't you? I mean, he can catch passes. Boom. So I think he's a really interesting sleeper, and I'm glad that I decided to put him in the top 150 because I think he definitely belongs at the end there.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, these guys that can really catch passes are exciting to me for sure. At least we know that they have a calling card there, and I think Tracy does. All right. That is going to do it for another 4-episode week on the podcast. Silva's Top 150 is, of course, up. Also, the changelog for Silva's Top 150 and the changelog for our Top 300 rankings are up and running as well. And Silva's tiers were indeed released. Silva's tiers for drafting were indeed released here. If you have DraftKit Pro, be sure to check that out. Preseason DFS is also in full swing. College football best ball rankings are up as well. Early bird bundle for NFL is live. It's all happening. Head to SalvageTheRun.com for details. For Evan, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.